Welcome, creative adventurers. I'm Debbie Cohn with D-Cohn Designs. Thank you for stopping by today. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to sew a traditional 4-patch block, but with a slight half square triangle variation. It's quick and easy. I know you'll enjoy it. So this video is part of a series that I'm doing where I'm sewing along with the quiltinglife.com's block of the month for January 2022. I can't believe it's the 10th block, the 10th month. I don't know where the time has gone. I've really had fun sewing it. It's not too late to jump right in. If you'll go to quiltinglife.com, you can find all the information that you need to get started. Behind me on my makeshift design wall are the blocks that I've sewn so far for this quilt along. The one I'll be showing you today is this one right there. There it is, that one. So let me show you how to do it. Let's get started. Let's take a quick look at how this block is put together. It's easier than it looks. All you really have is 4 4-patch blocks. One up here of 4 plain patches, one down here with 4 plain patches, and then the other 2 4 patches are a group of 2 plain patches and 2 HSTs. Same down here, 2 plain patches and 2 HSTs. Then you just put the 4 4 patches together to make the center block. It's easy. Let's do it. Let's take a look at the tools you'll need to make this block. In addition to the typical tools you'll need, such as your rotary cutter and your snips and your mat, you'll want a straight edge to mark your HSTs. So you could use a quilting ruler, or I'm going to use this seam marker, and I'll explain why in a little bit. And then you'll need something to actually draw the lines to mark your HSTs. You could use a friction pen like this, or you could use a pencil, a chalk pencil, whatever works best for you. The first thing we'll want to do is mark our squares for the half square triangles. In this case, we will be cutting down the center of the diagonal of the squares. So what that means is I choose to mark my sewing lines rather than my cutting line. I'm going to take my background square right here. I'm going to use my medium seam marker, lay it up in the corner up here of my background square, and align this corner down here with the middle of the seam marker. Then I'm going to mark the lines on either side of the center of the diagonal. Again, I do it because I choose to mark my sewing lines rather than my cutting line. I think it's more accurate, but you do whatever works best for you. You could certainly use the traditional version where you mark the center diagonal and then sew a 1/4 inch on each side of it. I find this is more accurate for me. And then you'll want to mark your other half square triangles as well. And let's go ahead and take this to the machine and sew them. Okay, I have my HSTs on the machine ready to stitch. I'm going to go ahead and stitch right on my sew line like this. I'm going to flip this around now, and I'm going to stitch down the other side right on the line. Of course, you could use your diagonal seam tape instead to guide you. Whatever works best for you. Now that we've sewn along the diagonal lines, we're going to go ahead and trim them apart. You could use a rotary cutter and a straight edge. I'm just going to trim them with my scissors like this. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is trim them up to the size they need to be. You'll want to consult your pattern for the size for your HSTs depending on the size blocks you're sewing. I'm sewing the larger blocks. You could square up the half square triangles using a traditional method with the rotary cutter and a straight edge, but I prefer to use this tool, the Clearly Perfect Slotted Trimmer. I think it works well and it does save time. Let me show you how it works, but you can of course use whatever method works best for you. I'm going to lay the trimmer on my HSTs. I'm putting this seam line and this dotted line here, right matching one on top of the other. Then I'm going to take my rotary cutter and trim along both sides like this. And then I'll trim in the little slots. That cuts off the dog ears so you don't have to do it later. And there you go. When you open it up, it will be the right size you need. I'm going to press it open gently. You could just finger press, you could use a seam roller, or you could press with your iron. Whichever works best for you, and you'll have the correct size that you need. So I'm going to just finger press like this, gently, so I don't stretch the bias edge there. And let's go ahead and assemble the block. Now it's time to sew our 4 patches together. You can see here at the machine that I have a couple different ways to help me sew straight. I've got a 1/4 inch foot on my machine that came with my Brother machine. I also have diagonal seam tape. You could use either one or both. You could use a masking tape ledge. You could use the Seam Sew Easy guide or any other method that works best for you. I'll have a video on different tools you can use to help you sew straight coming up in the near future. So watch for that as well. So the first thing we're going to do is take the top 2 squares, lay them right sides together and sew with a 1/4 inch seam, and the same with the bottom 2. We can chain piece. In fact, since we have 3 4 patches, you could just line them all up and chain piece all of them at once. Let's go ahead and chain piece these 2. Here you can see I have chain pieced my double patches and I have finger pressed them to the dark side. Let me show you. I've pressed the seams to the dark side like that. That way, when we put it together, the seams will nest, one going this way, one going that way. So let's put them together with a 1/4 inch seam and stitch the 4 patch together. I'm going to nest my seams right here, pushing them up against one another nice and tight, and I'm going to pin. I am not a big pinner, but when it comes to nesting seams, I want them accurate, so I do pin there. There's the 4 patch. When I press it, let's flip it over, I'm going to press this middle seam open. That will help the entire block to lie flat. Do the same for the other 4 patch. Okay, let's assemble the block. So you can see I have my 2 4 patches, my 4 background squares, and my half square triangles. The way I started this was to put my 4 patches in the middle so that they show the fabrique squares going at a diagonal. Then I'm going to fill in with my half square triangles like this. The way I think of it is I have my darker fabrics touching there and my darker fabrics touching here like this. And then I'm going to fill in with my background squares. One there, one there, one there, and one there. Now it looks a little bit funny because I have not sewn them all together. That's why you have overlapping in these areas. So I wanted you to see it before we put the pieces together. You could do it the opposite way where you sew these 4 patches and these 4 patches and then assemble the 4 patches, or you can do it like this, whatever works best for you. So now we're going to assemble the 4 patches with the HSTs, with the half square triangles. Let's start with this one up here. We're going to do the same thing that we did with our regular 4 patches and then sew them together, right sides together with a 1/4 inch seam, both of them, and then sew both sections together. I'm not going to show you that. It's the same procedure as your regular 4 patches. They just happen to be half square triangles for 2 of those patches. Let me sew those 4 patches and I'll come back to you with the 4 patches. And here are the 4 patches, the 2 regular 4 patches and the 2 HST 4 patches. You'll notice that I pressed the blocks open. You could, of course, press them in alternating directions so that when you attach them there, that they'll be easy to nest. I prefer the open seams because it will make my block flatter, but you do whatever you feel is best. So I'm going to sew these 2 together like this and like this, and then I'm going to join the middle seam so we'll have one complete block, and I'll bring it right back to you. One quick note about pressing when you're putting the whole block together. I chose to press these seams here toward the dark fabric, this one toward the dark fabric. That way when I put the top and the bottom together, I can nest the seams. For me, it was important that they match at the very center of the block because that's where your eye goes. You could certainly press the seams open if you'd like. This last seam, when I sew them together, I will press that final seam open to make sure the block lies flat. I'll sew it together and come right back to you. So here's the center of the block, all sewn up and squared up, ready for the churn dash borders. I'm not going to show you how to attach the churn dash borders. You'll want to go to Sherry McConnell's A Quilting Life blog for the January 2022 post that explains in detail how to add the churn dash borders and download the free pattern there. So I'm going to go ahead and add the churn dash borders and I'll come back with the completed block. And here it is, the quiltinglife.com block of the month for October 2022. I just love how it turned out. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and tell a friend, subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's the best way you can support my channel. Stay tuned again next month where I'll be sewing the November and December blocks for this quilt along. And I'll be back very soon with another video full of quilting inspiration, tips, tricks, and how-tos. I'll see you again soon.